Well, hey, friends, welcome to AWKNG's Ask a Scholar podcast. This is where you, the everyday Christian, can get your questions about the Bible answered by a biblical scholar. I'm Carla.
And I'm Mike, and we're both glad that you decided to join our discussion. So let's dive in.
Well, welcome everyone to episode 35, where we are here to get your questions answered on the books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles. And we are really excited to have with us today Dr. Carol Kaminski. Welcome, Dr. Kaminski. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to join us.
Great. Well, it's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, why don't you take a moment just to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and what you study and where you work, and just let our listeners get to know you for a bit.
Great. So my name's Carol Kaminski. So I've been teaching Old Testament for about probably 25 years now, teaching at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, which is about half an hour north of Boston. And I originally had studied at the seminary, and you can tell that I'm not from in the US, so from Australia originally. And I came to study at Gordon Conwell, and then I did some further study over at England at Cambridge University. My work was in Genesis 1 to 11, so I love the book of Genesis and, of course, Chronicles that we're talking about today. And so my husband, we have two boys who have both recently got married, and I do a lot with a project called Casket Empty, which is really a lay education project. So that's probably what people know me most for with that Bible project.
Awesome. Well, we want to hear more about that Bible project as we near the end of this podcast. So we're going to get you to tell us a little bit more about that later on. It's funny. I love that you're from Australia. This is a fun fact. My son, he likes to change the settings on our GPS in our car. You know how they talk to you and they tell you where to turn. And right now mine is set on the Australian accent. And so I've got an Australian woman talking to me and telling me where to go. So it's kind of fun.
I have mine set on the Australian one as well.
There you go. Yeah, that's great.
It's quite fun. There are certain terms that are so different, of course, in the Boston area, and it's nice to hear the Australian accent.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, great. Well, thanks for giving us a little bit of info about you. And let's dive into our first question, because we've got a couple of good ones this episode, and I want to give you as much time as possible to chat through them with us. So the first question says, I was surprised to see that the last Old Testament books in our reading plan ends with Chronicles. I learned that the books in the Hebrew Bible have them appear in the end. Is there any significance to this for us as Christians? The normal order that I've seen was Chronicles always came after the books of Kings, which made the books feel repetitive. Yet now seeing it appear at the end after we had read Kings months ago has added a different feel to it for me. What are your thoughts as to why Chronicles was made when we already have many of the same stories in the books of Kings? So let us know your thoughts here.
Well, that's a great question. And first of all, for the reader, congratulations on getting through 1st and 2nd Chronicles, right? Because that's a lot of material. And yeah, so the placement of the book itself can vary. So, and really, our English Bible is based on the Greek translation, so the Septuagint. And so in the Old Testament, in our English Bible, we have it based on, it's in the historical books. And so that's why you have Samuel, Kings, and then Chronicles. And I think to your point, it can feel repetitious. So I will address that issue of why do we even have Chronicles? So I think it can feel repetitious, but it is according to the genre. And so when it comes to the Hebrew Bible places it right at the end, which, has a very nice, very positive outlook, because the canon finishes with an invitation to go back to Jerusalem. So you can think of in that term, although not all the manuscripts have it in that spot. So what difference does that make for reading? I think as you read through the scriptures, one of the questions is, as you're reading it, are you reading it through canonical order? Are you reading it through the chronology? It is helpful to know why it was written and the audience, because I think that also will help you when you're comparing Kings and Chronicles, because it can feel repetitive, but there's a lot of new material that is in Chronicles that's not in Kings, and knowing a little bit about the context helps us with that. So I think, Carla, with the question that's been asked, underlying that is, well, why do we even have Chronicles when it seems to repeat so much? And the first thing is it does repeat a lot of material.
Yeah.
But Chronicles is written during the final time of the Old Testament. So if you think of that last 100 years, God's people have been in exile for 70 years, then they've gone back into Jerusalem, and it's really a difficult time as they've had to rebuild. We've got the temple they've had to rebuild, and the place has been in ruins. And
Hmm.
so I think it's absolutely fascinating that here you have this author, and we call him the chronicler because he's not named anywhere. He's probably a Levite. But what's fascinating in this final time of the Old Testament, when they don't have all the land that they used to have, we know from Nehemiah that there's some financial difficulties, uh, and there are foreigners living all around them. And
Hmm.
here you have someone, the chronicler, writing this material, and he's retelling the stories, but he's giving them sermons, if you like, for the
Hmm.
new context in which they're in. And so he's going to highlight theological themes that are not in Kings. And we'll be talking about some of those that are not in Kings, because he's actually communicating God's word for this new generation. So I think that's very exciting.
Mm.
But it requires a little bit of thought to think through, well, what are some of those themes that we can start to look out for? That was a long question and a long answer,
No, that's
but it's a
really,
good
really
one.
helpful. Yeah, very helpful. Mike, any additional thoughts on that?
So one of the things that I had noticed about the Book of Chronicles was that there was not any real mention about the Northern Kingdom. And it seems to be that the writer actually was trying to focus on the glory days of the kingdom of Judah, as though he was sort of asking this question, what if our kings were not terrible? Because
Hmm.
I noticed there are these like missing little pieces, like the whole entire thing with David and Bathsheba is not in the Book of Chronicles.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And there seems to be a de-emphasis on the bad stuff that the Southern Kings did and tries to focus a lot more on the good things that they did.
Yeah, that's a great observation. So I think not having the Northern Kings, they're certainly there, but there's not a focus. There's not a focus on Saul, right? For
Mm.
those who have read through Chronicles and you've gone through the Samuel narrative, all those stories about Saul, and just one chapter about him in Chronicles, what? His death, because it's his death that ushers in the turning of the kingdom.
Mm.
And so what you're starting to see is the chronicler's not simply giving a history, because they have a history, but what he is doing is selectively looking at the story of the kings and highlighting other stories. For example, Solomon's idolatry is not mentioned. Everyone knows about Solomon's idolatry. And you can
Mm.
hear there's a couple of comments there, or the story with Bathsheba is not given. But again,
Hmm.
one or two references, and you can see that it's there. But what he is trying to highlight is what are some of the hallmarks of godly leadership, and what are some of the hallmarks of ungodly leadership. So, and when you think about when you're telling your own story, if you've got a particular purpose in mind, then you're going to trim some of those other areas to focus on what you do need to include. And one illustration would be, 9 chapters of genealogies that are not in King. So that means something else has to leave the work, basically. So he's got additional sections on David. And therefore, the focus is really on the southern kingdom of Judah. It's on Jerusalem. It's not on the northern tribes, because they ended in 722 BC in terms of the kingdom itself, even though there's some of the northerners are in the south. So it really is very much focused on the southern kingdom of Judah and Jerusalem.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. So interesting how there's all those little differences between Kings and Chronicles. And
Mhm.
if you can view it through that lens, you'll really start to appreciate them by themselves differently than just assuming it's a duplicate work of the same stories.
That's
Now, you
right.
mentioned something about genealogies, and I want to jump us to the next question because that's
Yeah.
what that one focuses on. This is the second question that came in. It says, I have never understood why the book of First Chronicles begins with 9 chapters of what feels like never ending genealogies, which is true. It does feel like it's never ending. And then the person goes on to say, I know there are other genealogies in the Bible and that they are important, but these don't seem important beyond just recording them for their own sake. What am I missing in appreciating these first 9 chapters? Or is it just something that we have to push through when reading the scriptures?
Again, that's a great question. And I think that's one of the reasons why people get put off Chronicles is because of
Hmm.
all those genealogies. Even when I was writing my commentary, I had started doing work in the genealogies and then I wrote the whole commentary. I came back to the genealogies and I thought, oh no, you're going to have to rework some of this because if
Mm.
you lose people in the genealogies, you're going to lose them for the rest of it, right? So the question is, why do we have the genealogies? So I think I can just highlight a couple of things here because I do think if we can get hold of the genealogies, it's going to introduce us to some key themes. So what are the 2 books in the Old Testament that have genealogies? Genesis and Chronicles. Why is that? Because both books are about promises God made to Abraham and to his seed. And in Chronicles, God makes the promise to David and his seed. So as soon
Mm.
as you have promises that are given
Hmm.
to a seed or a descendant, it means someone's going to be looking out for the genealogies because that's one of the things the genealogies are going to trace the line of King David. And then where's the one other place really that in the Bible that has a long section in genealogies? Matthew chapter 1. And
Yeah.
what does he quote? He's quoting Chronicles. I mean,
Yeah.
because he's going to be, and
Mm.
who does he start out? This is the book of Jesus Christ, Jesus Messiah, son of David, son of Abraham. And so he is quoting the genealogies to show that Jesus is the fulfillment of Abraham and the promises and the fulfillment of the promises to David. So Chronicles is opening with genealogies. One is to identify the line of Judah. Okay, so if you think about that, line of Judah is important.
Hmm.
Not only the line of Judah, but if you look at the 9 chapters of genealogies, the 2 most important ones are Judah and Levi, right? Tribe of, and think of Exodus 19 verse 5, that God has set apart his people as a priestly kingdom, a holy kingdom.
Yeah.
There's your theology right there in the genealogies. So they're the 2 most important genealogies because not only is there going to be the king ruling over the kingdom, but the priesthood and worship of God, which is at the center. So worship's another key theme, and you see it in the emphasis with the genealogies. All right, so a couple of other things. So the opening chapters of the genealogies, where do they begin? Right? Adam.
Hmm.
And if you were doing a story of the kingship, you would think you would start with David, right?
Yeah.
But in fact, he starts with Adam. Why? Because he's showing that the people of God, even in this final time when it looks unpromising, are the
Hmm.
fulfillment of God's creational purposes. So that's another theme that runs through, and that's why he's often said he's covering sacred history. But then the other thing I want to highlight too is why all the reference to all these tribes here, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure as you've read through it, you thought, well, goodness me, you've got all these tribes, and aren't we in the final time period? Why would we be concerned about all these other tribes? And the tribes are mentioned because there's a vision for the unity of the people of God. God has set apart his people Israel with the tribes, and that vision still stands. So even the genealogies, as the chronicle opens, he's giving a vision for the people, for the united people of God. And uh, throughout Chronicles, there's going to be times when people from the north join the southern kingdom. And if you look at 1 Chronicles chapter 9, which is the return when they go back, he says that there were people from Judah, Benjamin, Levi. They're all the tribes we expect. But you know who else he includes? Ephraim and Manasseh.
Hmm.
It's got a
Mm.
vision for a united people of God. How
Wow.
interesting is that?
That is so interesting. I've never connected those dots. That's really great. Mike, any thoughts on that? That's a lot to take in. I'm
I
still
know.
I'm still computing all that. I'm like, wow, to see all that. And
So
like,
I love genealogies.
I can
And
tell. It's
yeah,
great.
I love genealogy. And I mean, we haven't even broken down any of the theology in it, but this big vision of the united people of God, all the tribes, fulfilling the creative purposes. He's going to quote Abraham. And then also, you know what else is there? Sorry, I jumped in, Mike.
It's okay.
uh, the table of nations from Genesis chapter 10,
Mm,
right? Why is that? He's got these linear genealogies that go from Abraham to Isaac, Jacob to Israel to Judah. And then he's also got them with the table of nations. And it is saying to God's people who have nations all surrounding them that God has set you apart to be a worshiping and witnessing people among the nations. So it's missional, even in that opening
hmm.
chapter.
Mm.
When you were talking and you said there's genealogies in Genesis and there's genealogies in Chronicles, and then we talked about in the last question how in the Hebrew Bible, Chronicles comes last.
Yeah.
I assume that's intentional to almost bookend the beginning and the end of the Old Testament. Is that too simple to think?
No, I mean, some people do say that. I mean, with Chronicles, if you think of it, it's kind of this extensive summary of sacred history. I mean,
Hmm.
that's sort of what it's. So it starts with Adam, but then it's going to. So and it's tracing. It's leading to the tribe of Judah and the stories of the kings, and that, in one sense, goes back to Genesis, of course, with God's promise to Abraham and
Yeah.
Judah in Genesis 49.
Hmm.
So wherever it's placed, the same message is there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Mike, give us your thoughts.
Well, it was just really more in the line of also from the first question, because I did just remember the upcoming biblical Hebraica Quinta. From what
Yes.
I remember, it supposedly will actually put Chronicles at the beginning of the writings.
It does.
And so
Oh.
so I'm wondering if it's even just sort of maybe it originally was at the beginning and is almost like, hey, by the way, since I know who I'm talking to, you might be interested in knowing this about our people and being reminded of this sacred history, as you were saying, Dr. Kaminski.
Yeah, and that's yeah, so it is in that, and there's another manuscript as well that has it. So it's not a universal view that Chronicles is last. And of course, think of this, it begins with Adam. So it's actually starting that history too. And so some
Hmm.
have suggested that may be why it's been earlier.
Hmm.
But you're exactly right with the Quinta.
That's great. Awesome, you guys. Very good discussion up to this point. Let's jump to a quick commercial break and we'll come back and we'll hit a couple more questions. If you're not already reading with us, we'd love to have you start reading today. Every month in the Awakening Bible community, we read a book or several books of the Bible together. Readings are only 1 to 3 chapters a day, 5 days a week, with weekends reserved for catch up or deeper study. And as you read, we know that you will likely encounter questions, but that's where we come in. Submit your questions at AWKNG.com, and we will do our best to get them answered for you right here on the Ask a Scholar podcast. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. We are excited to continue our discussion here, and we are going to dive right into our third question of this episode. And Dr. Kaminski, this is what this student has asked. When I was reading First Chronicles chapter 2, a name appeared that I did, but at the same time did not recognize. It was in First Chronicles 2:7, a person named Akar who brought trouble on Israel by violating the ban on taking devoted things. Is this referring to the man named Achan in Joshua 7? If so, why is his name different between the books of Joshua and First Chronicles? Is it a misspelling, or is the author of Chronicles playing with something about their names in Hebrew? So unpack that for us.
Great. So look at this, another genealogy question. How about
Yeah,
that?
it's a
So
theme
yes,
of this episode.
yeah. So he is quoting the story, and this is a great example, quoting the story from Joshua chapter 7, and really just I mean, 1 or 2 sentences quoting the story, And it says the son of Carmi was Achan, the troubler, that's important, of Israel, who violated the ban, right? So that's picking up the story when he had taken goods that were had been dedicated to the Lord. And so Achan is just a nice little play on the term for troubler. He's just trying to call him the troubler. And he's recalling the story. This is important because this is in the genealogy of Judah, right? And the term used to violate the ban, I don't know what English version you're using. It can be translated as being unfaithful as well,
Mm.
but it is a key term in Chronicles. It's ma'al in Hebrew. It's a key term. And Achan is a good example of someone who violated the holy things, right? That which is holy, but the chronicler is going to use this same term to do with Saul right at the end of chapter 10. And there are a number of places when it is used, and including, and I'm just going to turn to it because it's picking up why is this story sort of important in chapter 9. So all Israel was enrolled by genealogies, and behold, they were written in the book of the Kings, and Judah was carried away into exile to Babylon for their unfaithfulness, same term. And so
Hmm.
the story with Achan or Achan, but same person, the story is highlighting that unfaithfulness is even found in the tribe of Judah. It's not just going to be Saul coming up. And Mike, you mentioned about how there's, some of the sins of the kings of the southern kingdom are not mentioned.
Mhm.
But here's a great example. Get the theology of sin and the line of Judah right in there, but he's using his own term, and the story in Joshua chapter 7 is being recalled to remind us that sin is also in the tribe of Judah. And there's a nice little play on the Hebrew term there, especially when you get a little comment in a genealogy that doesn't have a lot of information. Plays on words are quite delightful, and they're a great way for memorization as well. And if I have a moment afterwards, I'll come back to one little play on words.
I mean, I'm not surprised because I remember, I can't remember his name right now, but he was Abigail's original husband
Yeah,
before she ended up marrying David.
right,
But just like realistically, no mother would name their child that way.
right.
That it's just unfortunately how he was remembered. And so I was wondering, and based on this question from this person, yeah, was this just some sort of like, is there a variation on his name, or was it because it is actually a play on the Hebrew?
Yeah, it's a play on the Hebrew. And that's kind of common in genealogies. The Prayer of Jabez does that as well. There's a play there.
Hmm.
But I have to add this in somewhere because
Yeah,
anyone
please.
who's reading this, if you've gone through the genealogy, if you've got to read this little verse around names, okay, 1 Chronicles chapter 3,
Hmm.
Okay.
verse 19 lists verse 19, the sons of Zerubbabel, right? Again, this is not in Kings. So Zerubbabel, I used to have Dr. Kaiser would say Zerubbabel helped clean up the rubble. So
Uh,
he goes back to Jerusalem and he's leading them. But can you see the list of names? Meshulam, Hananiah, Shelimoth, Hashubah, Ohel. See that list of names?
mhm.
Hmm.
Okay. I'm just going to run them off quickly. Meshulam, restored. Hananiah, Yahweh is gracious. Shelimoth, peace. Hashubah, consideration. Ohel, tent of Yahweh. Berechiah, Yahweh is blessed. Hasadiah, Yahweh has shown loyalty. Yushab, let covenant loyalty be restored. I mean,
Wow.
think of each one of those kids, they're going back to Jerusalem during a time of great devastation, and
Hmm.
look at
Mm.
the theology that is just in those series of names. I mean,
Hmm.
Zerubbabel is this man of faith. and he recognizes God's grace and his mercy. And those names are recorded here as a way of showing God's faithfulness to his people. And look,
Mm.
people would have missed that if they hadn't read the genealogies.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Isn't that beautiful?
It
And
is.
it's just another reminder why knowing the primary language helps. Right?
Mhm.
Because as English speakers, we would not actually have noticed this. We've just been random people's names.
No.
Yeah,
And
and
Therefore,
so,
they,
hard names to even pronounce, much less
yes, that's
figuring out what
right.
they actually mean.
That's right. And so when you think of it, he's going back and there's great devastation and they're going through a difficult time. I mean, we even know a banking company in northern Mesopotamia that charges up to 40% interest, so it's really difficult, inflation, everything else. And, these kids get called, they're playing outside, they get called in, and Yahweh is gracious, come inside. I mean,
Hmm.
think of the names reverberating or restored. It's lunchtime. I mean, isn't that beautiful?
Ah, that's great. Wow. Oh goodness, I love that. I'm so glad you took the time to interject that one.
yeah.
So if you have any
Wonderful.
more little nuggets like that,
Yeah,
feel free to
I love
throw them
that. I just
in.
think,
Awesome. Well, I'm going to jump us to the next question because you already touched on Jabez, and that is what
yeah,
this question is. So this whole episode is around genealogies. So we're continuing to dive in.
yeah,
So this question says, this is my first time ever reading through the genealogies and chronicles. And I finally realized that the first
yeah.
time yeah, what'd you say?
Shout out to the person
Yes.
reading the genealogies.
I know somebody actually did it. Good job to this person. And they said, it's the first time that I finally realized that the first time that the prayer of Jabez is from
Mhm.
here. I had never read through the book that came out, meaning the prayer of Jabez book that came out, but I was surprised to see how short the prayer was or how it could have garnished so much attention as it did so many years ago. What are your thoughts regarding this prayer? And is it something that modern Christians ought to still pray occasionally?
Yeah. Yeah, so the prayer of Jabez, for those who are watching, so it's in 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verses 9 following. So a few verses, Jabez was more honorable than his brothers. His mother named him Jabez because I bore him in pain. Here is a play on the term for pain being used, the Hebrew word. So so she is recalling that painful birth in whatever way. And then Jabez now is being highlighted because he calls upon the Lord. So, what happens in Chronicles and the genealogies, there's several places, little mini sermonettes being given in there
Mm-hmm.
to encourage people because prayer's a major theme in Chronicles, crying out to God for help, prayer, seeking Him is reverberates throughout the book. So here's a great little opportunity for the chronicler to highlight prayer. Let me just give you one other example, and then I'll come back to it. In
Okay.
chapter 5, verse 20, it's a little story of the Reubenites and the Manasseh and this little battle. And just one verse, verse 20, it says, they were helped against their enemies
Hmm.
and for they cried out to God in the battle, and God answered their prayers because they trusted in Him. See, that's another little
Yep.
short sentence, couple of sentences about prayer, because why? The chronicler, and I would argue God through him, is exhorting his people to pray.
Hmm.
So then the question is the prayer of Jabez, is this one of these prayers that you pray? Now, I have read through the book and I have in my commentary, I have a section on this talking about the prayer of Jabez, because in the prayer of Jabez, you're meant to pray it every day for 30 days and you're meant to read the book once a week. And some of the themes in the prayer of Jabez suggest that God is going to bless you and bring increase. And of course, there's free me from pain, all these sorts of things. Uh, I'm not sure that the original authors intended it to be kind of fed into that prosperity gospel, free of pain kind of, but that's kind of what has happened with it.
Hmm.
And anytime you have to say this prayer for 30 days and see what will happen, that's starting to sound a little bit more like a magic type thing, right? But the other thing too is, so is it okay to pray this prayer every so often? Of course, it's scripture to ask God.
Yeah.
But the prayer that I would be looking at, if you want to have one Bible verse in Chronicles that really is central to the book and to the themes of the book, it is Second Chronicles 7:14. That's a good one to memorize. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face.
Mhm.
And where does that start? The first thing it starts with is humbling ourselves. And that's a key
Hmm.
theme. So what happens in Chronicles is when a king humbles himself, the chronicle is going to talk about it because he wants, and that is something we probably could be doing today, right? And prayer and seeking the face of God. So that is one of the verses that really is a theme verse for the book. And of course, even with the Prayer of Jabez, with the whole history of the book, I mentioned it in the book. There was quite some significant criticism as well,
Hmm.
about this idea of blessing and not having the hardship and these sorts of things to do with his own ministry. And one of my things I think we need to be careful of is taking a theology of the West that fits our materialism kind of context. I mean, what about people who are in Nigeria right now? I'm sure you've seen all the Christians that are getting killed in Nigeria. We
Hmm.
know a couple who are
Mhm.
from there originally, who are missionaries there. You know, whatever theology we have should fit globally, the whole church.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And those people are certainly not free from pain.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be careful with this.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a really great reminder.
I remember this book like 25 years ago, and
Yeah.
the church that I grew up in, they did a whole entire like 30 days of prayer Jabez kind of thing. And eventually, like I actually tried to avoid the book.
Yeah.
And eventually, one of my family members sent me an English copy with a Chinese translation
Yeah.
embedded in it. So it's like, okay, I guess I should just read it because it was a Christmas present. At the end of it, like I just remember it was like, okay, I agree with some of the basic premises, but I couldn't understand like why did it get and garner so much of this kind of attention. In the end, it was like, okay, all of us should pray. Yes, we
Yeah.
should ask for blessing,
Yeah.
and that's not a wrong thing.
No, that's right.
It, but it was such a strange feeling. I remember how this was just
Yeah.
like everywhere in
Yeah.
evangelical culture.
Oh, it's of millions and millions, absolutely millions. I just think it's interesting in our culture, and we could think about, say, others out there that, um, I sometimes talk about the book by Joel Osteen, 31 Blessings to Claim, and, the books that say, take up your cross daily and follow me,
Mm,
they don't seem to get the high numbers. You know what I
Sure.
mean? You will be persecuted for my name's sake.
Right.
Memorize
Don't buy
that.
that book.
Yeah. So there is a little bit of that. I mean, I think in Chronicles, I think the point what he is trying to highlight is it right to cry out to God during your distress?
mhm,
Absolutely. And he's going to give example upon example of that in Chronicles. One of my favorite is when King Jehoshaphat he sets up an alliance with the northern king. It's just this story where he goes out to battle when he shouldn't have. Not only does he go out to battle with Ahab, but he also wears the royal garments when Ahab doesn't. And it looks like he's about to get killed. And at the last moment, he cries out to God for help, and God delivers him.
Hmm.
And I
mm.
think that's the message of Chronicles, that whatever circumstances you're going in, and the people were going through these circumstances themselves and crying out to God for help in our distress. And the Psalms, of course, are full of this.
Hmm. Now, Jabez, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't mentioned anywhere else in the Bible, correct?
That's right.
Mhm.
Is there
Just to
any,
hear.
just here, yeah. Is there any other materials that tell us more about who Jabez was that you found? It's just nothing. It's all we get is
Nothing.
this.
Just
Yeah.
this.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Which I think further drives your point home that it's really just more so about the need to surrender to the Lord in prayer
That's right.
Yeah.
versus understanding the details of his specific circumstances so that we can
That's right.
duplicate that in our own lives. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and the theme of prayer, seeking the face of God, um, there's the verb to seek. There are two verbs used in the book to seek the face of God. I mean, the verb to seek is used more often in Chronicles than in any other book, over 40 times.
Wow.
Mm.
Uh, so this book's all about worship and seeking the Lord, and so therefore he's going to highlight kings like Jehoshaphat that fall on their
Mhm.
face before the Lord.
Hmm. Hmm. Definitely a thing we need to keep in mind when we read through this then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, Mike, any final thoughts before we wrap up this episode?
I mean, I think I appreciated just this. It, in some sense, these questions kind of highlighted in some sense, the audience that the chronicler was focusing on. He
Yeah.
was really
Mm-hmm.
trying to exhort them. We're in a really bad place. Seek after God,
Yeah.
pray
Yeah.
to Him, look towards Him, and that's a very earnest and fervent thing that the chronicler seems to be emphasizing because he knows his audience.
Yeah. Yeah. And God can use these seasons of our lives, right? God uses the seasons of our lives when we're going through difficult times that drives us to our knees. And I think that's kind of what's happening at a corporate level with his people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're totally right. Well, Dr. Kaminski, thank you for all your wisdom on this episode. I liked that we got to dive into the genealogies a lot. You pulled
Yes.
out not just like, boring history. You pulled out some really great gems that we need to think about whenever we read through chapters like this. So thank you for that. As we wrap up, we'd love to hear about your resources. If you could kind of
Yeah.
share with us how students could engage more of the resources that you've created, the projects you might be working on. So take some time to tell us about those.
Right. So yeah, for those who are interested, I did grab my commentary, but for those who are interested in, diving deeper into Chronicles, so the Story of God commentary series, and I'm very proud of this series because it is designed. You have exegetical analysis on every chapter, so I work through the chapter and explain it. But it says the Story of God Bible commentary, so it's designed to help people um, see the scriptures within the larger narrative. And so that's why I think that's helpful. And 40% of the commentary is called Live the Story or Application. So that means every chapter in Chronicles has a section on application and really thinking through what is God wanting to communicate to us through these stories. So that's, I think, a great place. I've also written a commentary, a Bible study, women's Bible study called Cultivating Godliness. And
Hmm.
this imagery on the front is meant to reflect the temple iconography in terms of the beauty of creation. And
Mm.
this Bible study goes through a number of churches have been doing this, praying to God, seeking God, humbling oneself, listening to wise counsel, seeking God's help, giving generously, singing joyfully to the Lord. Who would have thought those would be in Chronicles? But it really, my goal is to really try and bring Chronicles to the church, especially for thinking of it as a book about spiritual disciplines as well. So, and then the other thing I'm working on over the years is part of my Casket Empty Bible project. So it's literally Casket Empty. Sometimes people double take and go, sorry, what was that? So, but Casket Empty is an acronym to help people learn the Bible. With casket represents the Old Testament, creation, Abraham, Sinai, kings, exile, temple, and then
Hmm.
empty represents the New Testament, expectations, Messiah, Pentecost, teachings yet to come. And so
Hmm.
casket empty points to the death and resurrection of Jesus as the center of the story. So I have all kinds of things with that. I have study guides, we have timelines, maps. You could find out more at casketempty.com, but it's been translated in about 7 different languages. So, but really trying to help people get the story of the Bible and see how the Old Testament is fulfilled with the coming of Jesus. So
Mhm.
that's yeah, it's a fun project. I do seminars in churches and yeah,
I'm excited to
Love,
check that one out. I know
love
our
one.
those of our students that have dug into our study guide for the books of Chronicles, we pull from your commentary
Yeah,
a lot.
great.
So I know I've already been familiarized with that resource, and it's a great resource for those that are listening. You need to make sure you get a copy, and then hopefully you'll go and check out Casket Empty as well. That sounds
Yeah,
great. And we will link links to all of this in our
great.
notes for the podcast. So students that are watching, just go and click on that and you can get direct links to get more of Dr. Kaminski's resources. Okay, awesome. Well, as we wrap up, we'd like to ask one final fun
Yep.
question so that we can get to know you on a fun level. So our question for today is, what is your favorite thing to do on vacation? Tell us how you
Oh,
like to have fun.
okay. Love the beach.
Okay.
Love the any. It's of course I'm about half an hour north of Boston, so uh, the water's usually too cold. So
Yeah.
I grew up in Australia and we had a pool growing, so I love anything to do at the beach, but I will walk on the beach. So anything outdoors, I enjoy that as well. Just lovely scenery, nice restaurants. About 2 years ago, I was in Cambridge because I studied there. Loved that. Did some of the history of the place as well. And
Hmm.
but yeah, beach is a big thing if it's warm enough.
Did you ever surf as a kid?
No.
No,
Although
never
our
surfed.
boys, when they went to Australia, we did surfing lessons, and uh, the boys said to me there was a big race on that day, like
Hmm.
a pub to pier swimming
Okay.
race. It was on kind of the next day, so the boys were doing these lessons, and they were like, "Mum, why are the helicopters around?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'll tell you that later." Because the helicopters are looking out for sharks. But that would not be good. They were fine and there was no problem.
Oh my.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That's the one reason why I would never want to try and surf because I'm terrified of sharks.
Especially in Florida. But
Yes. Oh, goodness gracious. Well, awesome. Well, it's been really great to learn from you and get to know you better. And we're excited to have you back for a second episode as we cover some more questions. So, thank you so much for joining us. And, students, we hope that you will come back and listen to the second episode with Dr. Kaminski as she answers more of your questions. And in the meantime, if you can make sure you share, like, subscribe, leave us a review, and we will see you right back here next time. If you're enjoying the Ask a Scholar podcast, click follow on your podcast listening app to subscribe. Want to help further our mission? Consider becoming a monthly partner at AWKNG.com and help us make an impact in the lives of others all around the world as we work to make biblical understanding accessible to all with no exceptions. Join us next time as we get more of your Bible questions answered. And don't forget to visit AWKNG.com to engage in all our biblical resources that we offer.